here's my updated perspective on ground grappling, Jiu Jitsu, wrestling, all that stuff. I believe that at some point in my adolescence, maybe sometime around puberty or what have you, my culture determined that it was no longer okay to grapple and wrestle around on the ground unless it was for some kind of competitive or hyper-violent purpose. And I think this taboo is related to the larger problem that Western society has with sexuality and the body. I mean, if you turn on the television, you can watch all kinds of violence in the extreme, but people are not allowed to say the word fuck, and certainly not allowed to show sex on regular programming, even in the even in the kind of the paid programming, like regular stuff, HBO or what have you, Showtime. You're not going to see. You're starting to see more sex, but you're not going to see it like as vividly as you would in pornography, for instance. Sex is taboo in the Western society. It's the same reason that when we cuss, it's all has to do with sexual things or bodily functions. You know, you pissed me off, I don't give a shit, fuck you, all of this stuff all refers to sex and bodily functions. Other cultures, when they're, being explicit, that's not the stuff that they refer to. It's actually a very strange, weird Western cultural thing that the body is so taboo, and so references to bodily functions and to sexual expression are the very height of insulting and disgusting language. So it's bizarre, but somehow I believe wrestling and grappling and all of that stuff is tied into that cultural taboo, that problem that Western culture has with sexuality and the body. And so it's okay for children to engage in it because they're not sexual beings yet, but once you become a sexual being, then you're not supposed to, unless it is a expression of like hyper masculinity, where you're gonna beat somebody up. If you're gonna hurt somebody, it's okay, because that's a violent expression rather than an expression of any kind of intimacy. The truth is, when you're wrestling or ground grappling and such, by our nature, it's a more playful thing. It's neither a sexual thing, nor is it a violent thing. But in Western society, because of the physical intimacy, it is too reminiscent of the sexual, and so in order to allow it at all, it's only allowed in the hyper-violent form. And so, for me, growing up, in my culture, I never got interested in that kind of Like I used to grapple and wrestle and stuff with my brother growing up, just because it's the natural thing for any mammalian species to do. You engage in that as play, and as expressions of you know power, and probably partly for bonding and this kind of a thing, and as a form of sparring to learn how your body works. You do it for all these reasons, naturally. But as I grew a little bit older, I wasn't interested in any of the cultural forms available to me, because what were they? They were either high school wrestling or getting into the whole pro wrestling entertainment crap. And I always hated that stuff, because you have these hyper masculine forms, and great big bodybuilder guys, and it was all fake, and it was all just show business. And yeah, I can never get into that. I can never get into high school wrestling, because they wore these weird tight uniforms and stuff, and already by that time my mind would have been influenced by the culture enough to think that I don't want to be in that kind of intimate contact with another guy, especially a stranger. And I wasn't into sports at all. I did martial arts. But at that time, martial arts was much more like kickboxing kind of a thing in North America. So I was practicing a mixture of Taekwondo, Jeet Kune Do concepts, and Kempo. And we really didn't have much for ground grappling. There were some locks that we put guys in, if they got knocked down or what have you. But there certainly wasn't anything like Jiu Jitsu going on with us. All of that stuff, all of the Jiu Jitsu, and that ground grappling, was kind of developed into North American martial arts in the MMA scene, which, because it was a sport, and seemed to be very similar to wrestling in the type of fans that it would attract, I was not interested in it at all. But coming back into martial arts after about an 8-year hiatus in my 40s, and recognizing that the whole scene has changed, and that this ground grappling really has proven to be effective. And I think, why didn't we have ground grappling? And it's making me come to these realizations about the taboos, the social taboos around intimacy in the body and this kind of a thing. And how really I think a large part of the attraction to the MMA sports scene is because of the hyper-violence, and the way that it provides an avenue to participate in that kind of grappling sparring stuff that we should be able to do in a more playful way. And so anyway, I've taken to now to starting to try to learn some ground grappling, and I'm working with my sister-in-law, and I'll work with others as well, I'm sure, as we go along here. But in any case, for myself, I've come, my artistic vision, if you want to talk about martial arts, my artistic vision is to explore my potential as a real human being. And the fact is, real human beings would practice playful sparring in grappling range. A real human being would do that, just like real mammals of every other species do that. Every other species that you look at, they start practicing grappling, sparring at a young age, and they continue. Even into, an old age, it's not uncommon to find an old dog that once in a while gets some spunk and wants to spar. And will, get on its back even and try to defend from its back. This is the reality. That is our animal nature. It is that grappling is hardwired into our genetic inheritance. This is the bodies that we have, and this is how they work. By nature, we are grapplers. We're also strikers, but we're also grapplers. And to leave out that grappling because of this taboo against physical intimacy in Western culture is stupid. And it's equally stupid to neglect training in ground grappling because of some political position, because of not liking the hyper-violence of combat sports. Because what I'm saying is that the true human ground grappling is not that hyper-violence. It is like every other animal species. It's a game that we can play in a playful, happy, frolicking, joyful kind of way where we're learning skills with our body, and it's not about training to go into that we're like preparing ourselves to go into a ring to fight. Yeah, we are preparing ourselves to be able to defend ourselves in violent situations against other humans and against, some other animals even. But not in the way that is done in a lot of MMA gyms where it's just taken far too seriously. I mean, it's a good thing that the science of grappling has developed. It's just like blossomed so hugely in recent years, where a lot has been learned. And a lot of that is because of the actual fighting and the seriousness. And I'm not saying we should get rid of that. In fact, totally the opposite. I am starting to develop a respect for the role of that actual fighting as a mechanism for boosting our understanding of what works, what doesn't, all of this stuff, and the development of the martial arts. But the development, the evolution of the martial arts, I'm having a respect, in a sense, for some of that combat sport. But I also recognize that a lot of it is anchored in that taboo, and that it's a North American or Western cultural thing that's spreading. It's becoming a global culture, where the value is placed on the fighting, and rather than rather than the health, the social health, the physical health, and the personal development of the skills of the body, which are the important artistic aspects. Um, it's so much about fighting, and the reason it's so much about fighting is because Western culture does not allow itself to just be intimate without that hyperviolence. It's a weird, twisted, fucked up thing that's going on in the culture that I'm a member of, and I don't know how to break out of it, but I know that I do enjoy the martial arts. Has so many benefits, and I think is very important for me in my vision to explore the potential, my human potential. And I am not going to leave out grappling. What I'm going to do is explore how to playfully grapple like any other animal does, and allow that play to help me develop skills. And do I learn from others? Yeah, it's silly to even suggest that that we are isolates somehow in a vacuum, that we're not learning from others. Yeah, I'm going to learn from others. There's all kinds of resources out there to learn effective techniques to practice in grappling, and I'm going to use those. Of course. And that's our human inheritance. That knowledge, the knowledge that's been accumulated through years of actual tests and trials, that's our inheritance. And we should transfer that and perpetuate that. And I'm not interested in turning a blind eye and just sorting it out for myself. To me, that's not the art. The art is exploring my human potential, what it is to be a real human being. That's my artistic vision. So that's my updated perspective on that whole scene. And I'm going to continue and see where the exploration takes me.